Namibian wine. All right, I'll be honest. Uh, when this deep dive was requested, Namibian wine, I was a little surprised. Desert safaris, sure. Landscapes, obviously.
Why?
But vineyards, that's not usually the first thing that comes to mind.
It's not exactly Napa Valley, is it? I'll admit, even I was a bit curious when I first heard about it.
Right. But the more research I did for this, the more fascinated I became. So, get ready to explore Namibian wine with us. The unique terroir, the winemakers, even the flavor profiles you can expect. It's truly unlike any other wine region out there.
Definitely not your average wine deep dive. It really speaks to, well, the resilience of nature and the dedication of these winemakers.
To put it mildly, so let's set the scene here. When we picture Namibian wine country, what are we even picturing? I'm looking at a map right now and, well, it's a lot of desert.
Yeah, there's no getting around that. It's a lot of sand, that's for sure. But imagine this. Vineyards, right there, clinging to the mountainsides. Some cooled by ocean breezes, others tucked away between those incredible sand dunes. It's a land of some pretty stark contrasts, and honestly, that's what makes the wine so interesting.
Okay, I'm starting to get the picture. So we're not talking about just one region, obviously, but several with their own little climates, their own unique characteristics.
Exactly. Take the Kuni region, for example. It's in the northwest, and it's actually where Namibian winemaking has its deepest roots. We're talking centuries of tradition there.
Centuries. Now that's a surprise. I'm going to need some more details on that.
So in Kune, you've got these vineyards planted high up. Some are over 1,400 meters. That means scorching sun during the day, but then at night, the temperatures really drop. Perfect conditions for slow ripening grapes, for developing really complex flavors. And the soil there, ancient, rocky, weathered down over, well, millennia really. Not a lot of nutrients for those vines.
So it's a real labor of love for those vines to survive.
You could say that, yeah. But that struggle, it's what gives the grapes this incredible concentration, especially the Shiraz and the Cabernet Sauvignon from Kune. There's this real intensity there, this distinct minerality like wet stone or crushed gravel, and this incredible depth of flavor. You just won't find that anywhere else.
Wow. I have to admit, I never would have pictured a Cabernet Sauvignon with a wet stone flavor. All right, Kunit, you're going on my list. But Namibia is a pretty big country. What else is out there?
Let's head over to the coast, to Swakopmund. It's like stepping into a different world, really.
Okay, from desert to ocean. Now you've got my attention.
The Atlantic Ocean plays a huge part there. You've got these cool, humid breezes coming in off the water, which really moderate the temperatures. It creates this unique little microclimate, perfect for certain types of grapes.
I'm going to guess we're talking white wines here.
You're on the right track. Think Sauvignon Blanc. Bursting with those citrus notes we love, but with this almost saline edge to it. It's that ocean spray. And then there's the Chardonnay, but not that typical buttery, oaky Chardonnay. No, this is Chardonnay with a real vibrancy, lots of minerality, even a hint of, well, you could almost say a hint of the sea in there.
It's like you're tasting the landscape in the glass. That's incredible.
Exactly. Each sip is like a little journey for your senses. And now, for something completely different, let's head back inland. This time to Omaruru.
Back to the desert.
Not quite. See, Omaruru is tucked away in this valley surrounded by these really beautiful, rugged mountains. So it's still high altitude. You've still got those rocky, well-drained soils. But the difference between the daytime and nighttime temperatures is even more dramatic here.
And how does that difference affect the wines themselves?
Intensity. Aromatics. Oamaru is known for producing some of the most intensely aromatic wines in all of Namibia. They've got great structure, good backbone, but there's a really beautiful elegance to them as well.
Okay, so let me get this straight. Bold reds in Kunene, those crisp whites over in Swakopmund, and intensely aromatic rinds in Omaruru. Are there any other regions in Namibia making a splash in the world of wine?
Oh, absolutely. Namibian wine is having a real moment, and there are always new players coming onto the scene. Windhoek is one to keep an eye on. Being the capital, it has resources, and the wine scene there is definitely worth exploring. Then there's Kamanjab.
Kamanjab. Now that name rings a bell, but I'm pretty sure it's not for the wine.
Probably not. It's better known for its cheetahs, actually.
Cheetahs and wine. Now that's a pairing I haven't seen before.
Right. But that just goes to show you Namibia is full of surprises. It's true, Kamanjab is still pretty new to the winemaking scene. But they've definitely got the land for it, the passion. They're definitely one to watch.
It's like the Wild West, but for winemaking.
Exactly. They're experimenting, they're pushing boundaries. It's really exciting to see what they come up with next.
Well, I have to say, This is already shaping up to be more of an adventure than I ever pictured accompanying a glass of wine.
Yeah.
And we haven't even talked about the grapes yet.
Oh, and trust me, there are even more surprises in store when it comes to what they're growing in Namibia. But I think we need to take a quick break. We'll be back to talk about those grapes in just a bit, so don't go anywhere.
All right, so we're back, and I'm ready to dive into these grapes. Because I have to be honest, even after hearing about those regions, I'm still picturing, vines right up against these huge sand dunes. Are there really grapes that can handle that?
It's a fair question. It really is. And the answer is, well, you're probably going to be surprised by what actually thrives in those conditions.
Oh, I love a good surprise. Lay it on me.
Okay, so Namibian winemakers, they're smart. They've really strategically chosen to plant a lot of those international varieties, the ones that are known for doing well in warmer climates.
So are we talking like Cabernet Sauvignon? Because if I can get a good Cabernet in Namibia, I might just book a flight right now.
Well, you're in luck.
Yeah.
Cabernet Sauvignon actually grows really well there. Think, bold, structured wines with those really classic black currant and cedar notes. But then because of the Namibian terroir, you get this added layer of complexity, like this really nice tobacco leaf and dried herb thing going on. You don't often find that in cooler climates.
Okay, see, now that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Same grape, totally different personality.
Exactly. And it's not just Cabernet Sauvignon either. Shiraz, Merlot, Sauvignon Blanc, Chardonnay, they all do pretty darn well in Namibia.
But I'm guessing they're not quite the same as, say, what you'd find in France or California.
And that's what makes it interesting. Take, for instance, Shiraz. In Namibia, all those peppery, spicy notes that Shiraz is known for, they're almost amplified by the heat, by that unique soil. So you end up with these incredibly bold Shiraz, super expressive, with this really savory side to them.
I can practically taste it. Okay, so if I'm looking for a good starting point, I could ease myself in with some of those classics, but with that special Namibian twist. But I have a feeling there's more to the story. What about grapes that are a little more, shall we say, unexpected?
Now we're talking. Some of the winemakers there are pushing boundaries, experimenting with things like, Viognier, for example.
Viognier. I can't say I've heard of that one before.
It's a white grape, and it actually loves those hop conditions. It creates these really aromatic wines, almost floral,
Yeah.
You get notes of honeysuckle, maybe a hint of apricot. And you know what else? Syrah and even Pinot Noir are actually starting to show some real promise in certain areas.
Pinot Noir in the desert. That seems wild. But, I got to ask, are there any grapes that are truly unique to Namibia? Like indigenous varieties that we just wouldn't see anywhere else?
Wouldn't that be something else? Now, right now, they're mostly working with international varieties. That's true. However, there's a real movement happening right now to change that, to actually discover and start growing native Namibian grapes. Researchers, winemakers, they're out there right now searching the countryside, looking for ancient vines, vines that might hold the key to a whole new world of flavor. Imagine a grape that's perfectly suited to those extreme conditions, with flavors, aromas that nobody's even experienced before.
Okay, now that is what I call a discovery. So we've got the classic grapes, but with a Namibian spin. We have all this cool experimentation going on. And maybe, just maybe, one day, we'll all be sipping on a completely undiscovered Namibian grape. But let's talk about what's in the glass right now. What kind of wines can we actually expect from this part of the world?
You're in for a treat. I'm talking bold reds that can be aged for years, crisp, refreshing whites. We've even got elegant rosés and, sometimes even a touch of sweetness here and there.
Okay, you've got my attention. Tell me everything.
All right, let's start with those reds. Remember what we said about the climate, the soil, all that intensity? It really comes through in the glass. Expect concentrated fruit flavors, velvety tannins. These are wines that can stand up to some serious flavors, and they age incredibly well.
So we're talking like steak grilling over an open fire kind of wines.
You got it. Cabernet Sauvignon, you're going to get those dark fruit flavors, the spice, that tobacco note I mentioned. Shiraz, it leans more towards the bold side. You've got the black pepper, the leather, even that hint of game. And then Merlot, Merlot has that reputation for being a bit soft, right? But in Namibia, it takes on this really fascinating structure. Think more black cherry, more plum, not your typical jammy Merlot.
Wow, you're really making me rethink everything I thought I knew about Merlot. But for those of us who, even when we're dreaming of the desert, still crave a crisp, refreshing white.
Oh, Namibia's got you covered. Those ocean breezes we talked about, they're key to creating those crisp whites, the ones with that vibrant acidity. Sauvignon Blanc is phenomenal there, super zesty, citrusy, herbaceous. And Chardonnay. That can vary depending on the winemaker. Some are steely, very mineral driven. Others are a bit richer, more texture. It's really a spectrum.
And you mentioned rosés,
Hmm.
because, a chilled rosé on a hot day,
Yeah.
it's always a good idea.
Always a good idea. And Namibian rosés, they tend to be those drier styles that are so food friendly, perfect for a picnic, pairing with lighter dishes, delicate strawberry, maybe some watermelon, and always with that refreshing minerality. And if you're really lucky, you might stumble across a dessert wine or two. There aren't a ton out there, but definitely worth seeking out if you have a sweet tooth.
Okay, so we've got the regions now, we've got the grapes, the wine styles, but let's paint a picture here. What's the ultimate Namibian food and wine pairing? An experience that really captures what this country's all about.
Oh, I love where your head's at. All right, close your eyes and picture this. You're on a safari. The sun is setting over the savannah. 1,000 shades of orange, pink, red. It's incredible. You've got a plate in front of you, piled high with perfectly grilled kudu or maybe ormisix, and just the smell of it alone.
Okay, you're painting a pretty delicious picture here, I'm not going to lie. The anticipation is killing me. What am I drinking?
All right, so for those really rich, gamey meats, you want something that can stand up to them, right? A Cabernet Sauvignon with all that structure, those dark fruit flavors, that would be fantastic. Or maybe a more bold Shiraz, to echo those peppery notes in the meat. Some winemakers are doing really interesting things with Cabernet Shiraz blends that would be perfect.
The wine is practically part of the adventure at this point. All right, now let's head to the coast. What's on the menu there?
Let's say you're on the Skeleton Coast, wind in your hair, you can smell the salt air, feel it on your skin. In front of you, there's a platter of the absolute freshest seafood. Oysters, straight from the ocean, some grilled swordfish, maybe some prawns drizzled with garlic butter.
Okay, I'm there. You're speaking my language.
With a seafood feast like that, you need something with a little zest, right? A Sauvignon Blanc with all that citrusy acidity, it'll cut through the richness of that seafood beautifully. Or a Chardonnay, especially one that has a little minerality to play off of that saltiness from the ocean.
You're making me want to book a trip to Namibia right now. This all sounds incredible.
And don't forget about the pap. It's kind of like a maize porridge. It's a real staple there. For that, you could go a few different directions. A lighter red, maybe a Pinot Noir if you can find one, or even a crisp white. Really depends what else you've got going on.
So the key takeaway here is adventure. Namibian wine, it's about embracing the unexpected, trying something new, and discovering flavors you never even knew existed.
100%. It's a journey, a true adventure for your palate, and really for your sense of adventure overall. And speaking of journeys, well, we should probably meet the people who are making this all happen, those pioneers of Namibian wine. But first,
All right, so we're back. We've talked about the land, the grapes, the flavors. But now, let's meet the people who are actually making this magic happen. Who are the big names in Namibian wine?
it's important to keep in mind, Namibian winemaking, it's still a pretty new thing. Makes it even more exciting, if you ask me. These are true pioneers, really passionate about what they do, in love with the land.
It's like the Wild West, but for wine.
Exactly. But instead of panning for gold, they're crafting world-class wines. And each one of these winemakers, they bring something unique to the table, their own style, their own story.
Okay, I'm ready for those stories. Give me the highlights.
Well, you've got to start with one of the oldest wineries in Namibia, Swartland Winery. I mean, they've really set the bar high for classic, elegant wines, especially their Cabernet Sauvignon and Shiraz. Real commitment to those traditional methods, aging those wines to perfection.
So if I want a taste of Namibian history, I should look for a bottle of Swartland.
Without a doubt. Now, if it's that minerality, that vibrancy we were talking about earlier, you're looking for, check out Oamaru Wine Cellar, their Sauvignon Blanc and Chardonnay. Absolutely top-notch.
Okay, but we were talking about pushing boundaries.
All right.
What about winemakers who are experimenting with, say, natural or biodynamic methods? Anyone standing out there?
Keep an eye out for Kalahari Wild Wines. Their whole thing is minimal intervention. Let the grapes do their thing. Let the terroir speak for itself. Biodynamic viticulture, that's their jam. It's all about working with nature, using organic methods, biodynamic preparations, everything to make the soil as healthy as it can be.
So when you open a bottle of Kalahari Wild Wines, you're really tasting the wild.
Pretty much. Pure expression of the land. It's great.
I love that. Okay, what about over on the coast? Any names we should know there?
Monte Cristo. They're doing some really interesting stuff over there. Being located in Swakopmund, their wines have this, well, you get a little hint of the ocean in there. A little salinity, that fresh sea breeze that comes through in the glass.
It's amazing how much of a difference the environment really makes.
Oh, absolutely. And that's something these winemakers, they really get it. They respect that connection. I mean, they're not just making wine, they're crafting something unique, something that reflects their little corner of the world.
And speaking of unique, are there any producers out there working with those indigenous grapes we talked about earlier, those undiscovered varieties?
It's still early days, definitely. But yeah, there are a handful of wineries doing some really cool research into that. It's a slow process, painstaking. But the potential is huge. Imagine discovering a brand new grape, indigenous to Namibia, and sharing that with the world. It would be a total game changer.
Wow. Now that's something I'd love to see. So we've got these innovators, these pioneers, pushing the boundaries of what Namibian wine can be. What's next for them?
Honestly, the sky's the limit. They're getting more and more recognition internationally. The word is spreading about the quality, the uniqueness of their wines. You're starting to see Namibian wines pop up on wine lists all over the place, even in Michelin star restaurants.
So it's not just a hidden gem anymore.
Not for long. As more people discover it, discover the stories behind these wines, I think we're going to see some incredible things coming out of Namibia.
Well, after learning all this, I'm ready to track down some Namibian wine and do some exploring of my own.
Yeah.
Any final words of advice for our listeners before we wrap things up?
Honestly, if you get the chance to try a Namibian wine, go for it. You won't regret it.
Couldn't agree more. It's an experience. It's a reminder that sometimes the most unexpected places hold the most incredible surprises. So cheers to the winemakers of Namibia. Cheers to always trying new things. And of course, cheers to always keeping an open mind and an open bottle. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Namibian wine.